Hello everybody and welcome to the second episode of my Python tutorial series. This episode we will be talking about variables and data types, as well as casting data types. A lot of the things we're going to talk about have really complicated names but are really simple. The first thing obviously is the print statement. This is what we covered last lesson, where you can type in print with 2 parentheses and 2 speech marks and type in anything you like. When you run the code, it will give you an output. Now this is really useful for when you're wanting to make actual programs, so you can output data to the user so they can see what they want. Right, so now we're going to get into what variables are. Variables are an incredibly useful tool in coding, and they are used in almost every single project I create. They are essentially a box. If we have a look, I've got a box here. And every box has 2 things. It has data and it has a label. So if I call it a name, if I call it my name, I can call this box my name, and that is the name of the box. Now I can put data in this box. If I have John, I can put my name in the box, and now the value of my name is John. But what I can also do is, while the program is running, I can say, oh, I don't want it to be called John anymore. Let's make a new, put some new data in it, and I'll call myself Paul. So now I can say my name is Paul, and the box hasn't changed, but the data that is inside of it has changed. Now, in most languages, when you make the variable, you have to define what the variable is going to be before you create the variable. For example, the type of variable. So you've got integers, floats, strings, and these are called data types. And however, in Python, it automatically knows that which data type you are using. So if we jump into Python, we can make a variable by simply saying the variable name, so my name, and we put an equal sign, and then we say whatever we want to make it equal to. So if I say my name equals John, in speech marks because it's text, not a number, so my name equals John, and I can print. Now what we can do is we can print my name, and what will happen is it will print John, because that's what we put in the data. Now what we can also do is we can say my num. If I make a num, actually I did down here. My num is equal to 7. Now this, if we a comment, this is a string. This is an integer or an int, and that just means it's a number. If we print out, we can do the same thing. We can print out my num. And yeah, there we go. Now there are several different data types. There's strings, integers, there's booleans, which are, it's a complicated name, but all it means is true or false. So you can do true or you can do false. It has to be a capital with the T and the F, and it'll go orange if you've done it right. For boolean, you can also do a 0 or 1, 0 being false, 1 being true. There is a char, which is a single letter, so just J or S or whatever. And then the other one is lists. Now lists are much more complicated than names or numbers. And if we create a list, it's as simple as saying the name of the list. If I say my list is equal to, and we put 2 square brackets. Now this has created an empty list, and if I print my list, we should get some empty parentheses. Yeah. So now we've created an empty list. What can we do with this list? It's pretty cool. What we can do is we can create data inside. And if I say John, and what we can also do, which is different to most languages, is we can mix data types. So here I've got a string, and here I've got an integer, and they're both in the same list, but they are allowed. If we print it, we won't get an error. We'll have John and we'll have 1. What we can also do is we can index lists. But we're not going to go over that this lesson. We're going to go over that in the string manipulation lesson. The other data type that we are not going to talk about, there are 2 more. There's tuples and there are dictionaries. We're not going to talk about those today because they are quite complicated. The other thing we are going to talk about today though is something called casting. Now, casting is a method of turning one variable type into another. So, for example, if we have, if I take this away and I make my num equals to 7, notice that I've put them in speech marks. This means that it's a string. If I now print that out, my num, we will get it in, it will print it out as normal, as if it's a string, but this will cause some errors if we want to treat it as a number. Because if we say, for example, print my num plus 1, we will get an error because the 7 is a string, not a number. We do something called casting, where we say my num equals int my num, and what that does is it turns the variable my num, which is a string, and it extracts this data and turns it into the number 7. Now if we print my num plus 1, we get the number 8. It's pretty cool. The other type of casting we can do is from an integer back to a string. So if we have, if I change my num to equal 7 as a number, and I say print my num plus, and then cats, so we have 7 cats. This is called string concatenation. Don't worry about that, we'll talk about it in the strings advanced lesson. If I run this, we'll get an error because we're trying to add a string to a number. What we can do is if we put str in front of my num, we will convert the 7 into a string and we'll be able to print out 7 cats. So it's turn the 7, put it in speech marks, and then put cats after it, if that makes sense. Right, so that's basics of printing, what variables are, the types of variables, and some data types, as well as casting. In the next episode, we will be talking about operators, which are essentially things you can do to string to data types like integers, like plussing, minusing, that sort of thing, multiplying, and we will be going over the different operations that you can be doing on the variables. So if you guys have any questions, be sure to leave them down in the description, in the comments, and I will see you later.